Okay, so for this review, I want to get into COVID-19 here a little bit. This is an article, a recent article. LA orders stay home, USC's deadliest day ever, virus update. So, what's going on here? Because here in Asia, people are getting past COVID-19. Things are returning to normal. We don't have this huge crisis like in the West for some reason. The United States and parts of Europe are still really suffering because of COVID-19. And it's not like they weren't doing lockdowns or making people wear masks. They're doing all of that, maybe not to the extent that they did in Asia, but they're still doing it. So how are they, at this point, how are they still having record days where people are dying in record numbers and people are being hospitalized in record numbers? And the answer is, I honestly don't know, because everyone in the West, from the governments to the regulatory bodies to the pharmaceutical corporations, they are all equally corrupt, and people you cannot trust, and organizations and companies you cannot trust. They have a very long history of lying to people, and the pharmaceutical corporations, which I'll get into in a minute, uh, just the fact that they're being trusted with something this supposedly important just blows my mind. So when you go through this article, and this is what kind of raises some suspicions, you go through this article, and first they're trying to scare you about how bad it's getting again and how everyone's got to go back to lockdown, but then they slip in there that all these vaccines are starting to come online. So it's like, if you've been following this COVID-19 thing, you'll remember people have been quite hesitant about these vaccines because they've been rushed through. I think there's growing awareness about how corrupt these corporations are in the first place. And so people aren't really that sure that it's being done properly and that it will be safe to take these vaccines. Now, I'm not saying that vaccination doesn't work or anything like that. The science behind vaccination makes sense. What I'm saying is that not every vaccine might be safe or effective or even necessary. And the main problem here really isn't the science of vaccination, it's who's making the vaccines. So in this article, they talk about Pfizer and Moderna. And if we go over to this article, this is an article I wrote a while ago, but I go over some of the companies that were included in the US government's Operation Warp Speed. And I talk about how, some of the scandals these companies have been involved in. And when you read this and you see what they have done, sometimes they get fined or something like that, but they're all still in business despite doing these extremely horrible things. So the first one on the list here you see is Johnson and Johnson, and we remember that in the news, don't we? The baby powder, where Johnson and Johnson knew that it was tainted with asbestos, and they worried that it might end up giving customers cancer, and they talked about it in internal documents within the company, and they decided to just keep selling it anyway. And while they're not selling baby powder in North America, at least after the court ruling against them, they decided to stop selling baby powder in North America. They still sell it overseas because they just don't care. They'll get away with whatever you let them get away with. And so that's Johnson and Johnson, and they're one of the companies making COVID-19 vaccines. And then there's GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. They've been involved in some of the largest human healthcare fraud cases in human history, and not on pretty much every continent that they do business on. In China, there was this huge bribery racket that got broken up there. The largest case of human healthcare fraud in U.S. history was GSK, and so again, they're going to be making you COVID-19 vaccines. And here at Pfizer, who's already online to deliver their vaccines, they bribe doctors and healthcare officials in order to gain regulatory approval for the company's drugs. If your drug was great and it worked and it was effective, why would you have to bribe anyone to approve it? And so this raises questions We already know that they're rushing through to approve these vaccines, and it's being done too fast, and it's being done by these companies, these sort of companies that we know are corrupt. And then when we look at Pfizer and we see that they've actually paid regulatory bodies money to approve their products instead of just having it go through the system and be approved based on merit. They were bribing people to approve it. That should scare people. That should make you think twice before you get this COVID-19 vaccine. Is it safe? Because when they tell you that it's safe, is that because it's really safe? Or is that because Pfizer paid someone to say that it was safe? Because that's exactly what they just got in trouble here. A $60 million settlement. Okay? And for them, that's pocket change. They don't care about that. That's the cost of doing business for them. And every one of these companies has been involved in something similar. So just keep all of this in mind with this COVID-19, the whole thing. And what the media tries to do is try to divide you into two camps. Vaccines are real and they work. Vaccines don't work and they're dangerous. Don't fall for that. That's a false narrative. The science behind vaccination makes sense. The problem is not whether vaccines work or not. The problem is the corporations making them and the regulatory bodies that don't stand up to these corporations. That's where the problem is. That's where the danger is. And it doesn't matter whether the science of vaccination means they work and that we need them and they're important. The problem is we don't have trustworthy people to make them, and we don't have trustworthy people in the government to check to make sure that they're safe and effective. That's the problem here. So I'm probably going to continue getting into this in future reviews as these vaccines roll out, but I thought this was a good way to kind of introduce the topic and let you know that I've written about this in the past, and I'm going to continue writing about it, and I'll put the links in the video description below. Now, if you're a patron of mine, thank you very much for your support, and if you're watching this when I post it publicly, please like and share the video, and check the description, the video description, for ways you can support my work, like joining my Patreon account, and that allows you to contribute to my work, but you also get benefits in return. And as always, thank you very much for watching.